Welcome to a new episode of Master Your Mistakes. Today we have Joseph Fitzgibbon. Joseph is founder and CEO of Growth&Co, and he has gone from operator to founder turned recruiter and has advised over 300 startups, including Attio, Granola and Fyxer. Joseph, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Okay, so Joseph, what are the one or two big career mistakes that you're going to tell us about today?
Well, we discussed it before, and I think the being fired 3 times in a row is probably a wealth of stuff that we can explore for our dear listeners.
That's a great way to start this comeback story. And before we go into that, could you give us a little bit of background on yourself, your background before Growth&Co, and then how you founded Growth&Co itself?
Sure. To give you the slightly longer version, I originally wanted to be a diplomat. I graduated university. I went to India for 2 years. I worked at the British Embassy. I absolutely hated it and thought I can never do this in my life. But I met some consultants when I was there. I came to the UK, I worked in consulting. I did pharmaceutical consulting around pricing and market structure, which was good fun. But you're also making money on basically getting pharma companies to charge more for oncology drugs, which wasn't great. I did an MBA, and then I joined Diageo, so a big drinks business. And then I joined Graze, which is a big D2C business, which we can talk about. Then I joined Clare Mechanic, which is a marketplace for car repair. And then the last 7 years, I've been independent. So some of that is an independent consultant, and some of that is the model I have at the moment. So advising companies, hiring the right talent, and I also run a community of 425 senior growth folks.
Cool. And of the people that you've worked with Growth&Co, what for you has been one of the kind of favorite project, or what is your sort of favorite type of project to work on?
It's sort of slightly different, but like a lot of time we're brought in when the company has gone through a challenge. They are not growing, they are maybe declining, they've had some people leave, they've had some people fired, and coming in and trying to rebuild it, that is really, it's very difficult, but it's very motivating. So getting the business back on the right path, getting the revenue back in the right way, getting the team motivated, that is it's very difficult, it's very stressful, but it's ultimately very satisfying when you see the kind of when I joined revenue versus when I left revenue, and then you see it keep going on after we've departed.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of getting things back on the right path, the big mistakes that you're talking about, fired 3 times, what happened there, or what happened at each of those points?
Yeah, we'll go into that with some detail. I mean, to give you a bit of context, so my parents ran a business when I was younger. I always kind of wanted to be a founder at some point. I was always, frankly, pretty naive about what it takes to build a business and what it takes to be done. But when I was doing my internships at London Business School, I worked at PepsiCo, and I saw that Diageo had their own kind of venture scheme, and they were investing in early stage booze startups. So as I was on the train to PepsiCo, I was like writing my presentation about how do you build a booze company. And I was ex-consultant, so I was good at Excel and data and making things look pretty, but didn't have any industry expertise. So it was sort of a good learning, but ultimately it didn't work. And I thought, well, why don't I join Diageo, because I'll learn the kind of bits that are missing that I couldn't do myself. Mm. So I joined Diageo. I worked in their strategy team, and it was my dream job. Like, it was similar theoretically to what I used to do in pharmaceuticals, but it was much more fast moving, a lot more freedom, but I absolutely hated it. So with hindsight, I realized I've got ADHD, and it was the sort of kryptonite in terms of this role. So it was, because we were working on very like strategic and very secret things, you weren't able to discuss them. If you released them to the news, it would, change the share price. So like it's very sensitive. So you're working on this like long-term planning, very theoretical, and I wanted something that was tangible.
How quickly from joining, with all that initial glee and excitement, to feeling that it was the worst thing, how quickly did that kind of dread set in?
I think with hindsight, very, very early. But it's a little bit like, when you work in a business, it's never like bad every single day. Like if it is bad every single day, it's bad. Okay, fair enough. But if it's bad like a couple of days and you have a little bit of like positivity, or you have like something that's changing in the future, it gives you that sort of ray of hope. So you're like, well, this is bad, but like I'll be on a new project, or we're going to hire this person, or, whatever it is. So it's not like 18 months of, oh my God, I hate this. It's like, okay, this is bad, but like, I've just got to learn this thing and then this will be better. And I've just got to do this. And like, but it never gets better. It always does. So with hindsight, the job was pretty awful from day one. It was not what I was used to. It was not what I was expecting. It was very sort of secretive, very kind of in the weeds in a very theoretical way, not in a very sort of tangible way. And one of the things I did there was we had a raffle. We had to raise money for a charity that Diageo was supporting. And I went around the whole company raising money and getting people to donate booze, these sort of like elaborate bottles of booze. And I loved that more than the actual job itself. Like, I loved interacting with people. I love like building a bit of a strategy of how you do it. I love like raising money, and you see the tangible thing of like, okay, I've just raised $5,000 in a week. I ironically like that more than the job I was supposed to do. Interesting. So it was a tough time. I was just about to get married. I had my yearly review. It was, an hour and a half. It was fairly vanilla, to be honest. It wasn't like, it's like, oh, how do you think it went? Like, here's some stuff to improve on, blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay, fair enough. And it's like, right, we're going to put you on a performance plan. I was like, hang on a sec. We never discussed this in total. And basically I was getting pushed out, right? Sort of Diageo talk for getting pushed out. And it was, I was about to get married. I was like 6 weeks getting married. I was still like paying the bills of the wedding. But like that night I slept all the way through. And I was like, oh, this is my body telling me this is a really good decision, because on paper, I'm now unemployed. I've got a wedding to pay for, and I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. But the body was like, it's all good, right? You've left that situation. And with hindsight, it was bad from the beginning. But as I said, like, because it sort of has spots of good and things change, you think it's going to get better, but it doesn't. And, with hindsight, I should have left within the first 2 weeks. But it's, it should be my dream job. I should be learning from it. It should be helping me launch my own booze business. And it's very difficult to walk away, to be unemployed. And it's a very difficult thing. Like, people watching, like, when do you call a situation that's not right? Mm-hmm. And with hindsight, it's obvious, should have done it. But like at the time, you're like, well, I've got bills to pay, if only it gets better.
Do you have any questions that you would ask your previous self or someone else in that situation currently to help them determine whether this is something that's going to get better or is just always going to be problematic for them?
It's not it's an easy thing to say, but a difficult thing to do is that my skill set was never right for that role. And it took a long time for both sides to realize that. I don't begrudge Diageo doing it. I would have done the same situation. And it's like, if you're right-handed, then trying to write with your left hand, like, you can do it. The more practice you do, it'll get a bit better, but it's never going to be the same. It's never going to feel normal. It's never going to feel easy. And it's very easy saying, find a job or a skill where it feels like writing with your correct hand. But with hindsight, you realize it was wrong. It was, masses of detail, super theoretical, quite kind of isolated, and it just wasn't the environment where I was going to do well in. But at the time, it's hard to say. So I think like just being critical of your own skill and what's required, and also being critical of like, is it really going to improve? Like, is it driven by the personality of certain people or the nature of the job? Or, those things aren't going to change, right? You might have a new target or a new, whatever it might be. But if your kind of unhappiness is driven by the team or by the nature of your day-to-day job, that's not going to change. That's not going to move on.
Yeah. And on that sense of release or peace or that good night's sleep you got after you were, pushed out, if it was about 6 weeks until the wedding, how long did that sense of peace last? Or, did you make it past the wedding and then be like, oh, okay, I need to do X, Y, and Z? Or, what was happening in your your personal life in order to stay sane?
I mean, the wedding in some respects was quite useful because you've got a lot of admin to do. The joys of having gardening leave is the wolf is not quite at the door. I had 3 months to sort things out. And I applied for a job at Graze. It was a strategy role. It took a while to hear back, and they said, actually, you know what, that role has been taken, but we've got another job, and it's a head of growth role. And I was like, what on earth is that? And I was sort of massively thrown the deep end. It was a very fortunate kind of coming together because Graze was big and established, so therefore they were quite a well-oiled machine, and I could come in. They had tried to hire this role for a long time and had failed, and therefore were open to something different. And I'd just been fired. So I was like, well, I'm open for something different as well, and I'm willing to take a risk. So it sort of all worked quite nicely. And I remember when I was in consulting, like my first day, I was like, oncology. I was like, oh, what is that? I was like, oh, Googling it. I was like, oh, it's cancer. And then Graze was like, PPC, what is that? I was like, oh, it's Google. I was like, oh, okay, I get it. So I came in with like a sort of strategic background, but no tangible marketing experience. Luckily, my first project was to write the budget for next year, which I was actually quite good at. So it sort of gave me a little bit of time to like build up the skill. So I sort of effectively joined the ladder kind of halfway through and then climbed down to learn some of the practical things that I would have done if I joined, sort of marketing exec, marketing manager, marketing lead, etc., that kind of pathway.
How did you navigate the various relationships coming in, as you said, middle ladder, head of growth, and you've got people at your level and below who maybe have some like subject matter expertise that you were like picking up? How did you navigate that? To what degree was it just being very transparent around what you do know and what you don't know versus, doing some homework late at night to like try and figure it out?
I mean, I was doing a lot of homework. So I was meeting a lot of people. I was learning. I was learning quite fast, actually. But it's quite good in some respects when you don't know anything, because you're not trying to persuade anyone. And it also works well for the team because they're clearly the expert and you're clearly not. So if you go in with like some knowledge, then they can feel a bit threatened of like, oh, this person's going to interfere with my strategy or whatever it is. And like, I'm coming in day one not knowing what Google is, right? Well, knowing it is a search engine, but not knowing it is a channel. So I'm coming in with zero experience, and therefore I'm asking questions to learn and to explore, not to be like, why on earth are you doing that? Because I have no idea. So in some respects, it actually worked quite well entering because you're not threatening to anyone. And then you kind of build up that experience, and then you start to have your own opinion about things. But it actually worked quite well, ironically.
And so it worked quite well, ironically. Do you think if you were advising Graze now, do you think you would have advised them to take the same, gamble on you as they took on you? Do you think it was the right move purely from Graze's point of view?
Well, I've got to back myself, haven't I? I think it was the right move. I think they, I made a lot of mistakes at Graze, which we'll talk about in a sec. But they needed something different. They needed a different skill set. The business was getting a bit mature, and there was sort of me and a US counterpart, and we both were doing the budget. And I'd done loads of budgets in the past because I did the budget for the whole of Diageo, so absolutely nailed it. So those sorts of skills were quite useful, but you can learn some other views as well. So I think it did work well for them. It worked well for me personally. It was a sort of pivotal point in my career. But yeah, I think they got a good deal out of it as well.
Nice. What are some of the revenue stats of how Graze grew under your head of growth leadership?
You mean how Graze declined under my head of growth leadership?
Okay.
Graze was doing about 70 million when I joined. We sort of started to go into retail and then kind of pushed through retail, but it was going through a sort of massive maturing. So business had grown absolutely exponentially, incredible unit economics. It had done its first sales. It's had 3 sales in its lifetime, and it was more around kind of evolving the business and getting it ready for sale. And the challenge with a subscription business is you're your kind of P&L reality versus the front line can be quite different, because your P&L reflects your historic customers that you signed up rather than the ones you're signing up. So it was, pretty crazy time. But yeah, we did go into retail, and that was quite successful. But it was not a sort of, I mean, Graze as a whole was an exponential growth story. My window in Graze was not an exponential growth story.
And then what's next on this journey?
In terms of like mistakes of Graze.
In terms of mistakes. So this was big fire number one, come back into new head of growth role. What's the next big one?
I think with Graze there was, I mean, at Diageo we weren't allowed to work on any project that was worth less than 50 million quid. Like that was the benchmark for the strategy team. If we thought it was less than that, it was considered a waste of time. Whereas you join Graze and you're signing off like 100 quid's worth of marketing spend. So that adjustment was massive, and it took a bit of adjustment in terms of, what decisions should I just make myself? What decisions do I need to kind of loop people in? So it was definitely a big adjustment in terms of like how I operated. Like I remember going and like, Graze was like pretty informal, so like going like a sort of smart trousers and a shirt, very much like yourself. And Graze was like t-shirts and shorts, right?
Yep.
And it's sort of like a little bit of those sorts of adjustments in terms of how they operate. But it was a difficult time. So I'd got married. We were trying to buy a house, doing the sort of got a dog, doing the kind of cliche things in a row. And my probation got extended. So we just picked a house. We'd got our mortgage, approved, and the mortgage got pulled. So I had to phone my wife and be like, yeah, I'm not sure we're going to get this house.
And the mortgage got pulled because of the probation extension?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So some mortgage companies were fine about it, some were not, and the one we picked was not. And
that's stressful. That's big. That's like a big life event that people gear themselves up for, and then at the last minute, that hurdle coming up.
Because that was sort of, staring down the barrel of firing number two. Like it wasn't quite as extreme as that. Like I think the meeting with Graze actually was really good, because we just hadn't clarified a few things of like, okay, you want me just to make the decision and do it? And they're like, yeah. I was like, brilliant. So it was like a kind of night and day transformation, because it wasn't like I was trying not to take ownership. I just wasn't clear on where that ownership line was. And it's like, oh, okay, I thought you wanted me, you to do it. And I'm like, no, you need to do it. I was like, okay, brilliant. We'll just do it then. And then like straight away, like testing some things, moving some things forward. So it was quite a transformation.
A question on that. If you were giving advice to like individual people in their career, as a broad rule of thumb, and feel free to push back if this is too broad, do you think it's better for people to err on the side of making autonomous decisions and maybe overstepping their boundary versus taking a little bit less ownership and not wanting to step on other people's turf?
To slightly fudge my answer, I think the answer is you've got to ask, because the sensitivities of different people and different companies is different. So trying to figure it out by trial and error is stressful and difficult. You're much better off saying like, okay, I want to do this. In my previous role, I just would have done this. Like, do you want me to inform you? Do you want to be involved? Is this sensitive? Do you feel, is this a decision I can make on my own? And it's worth just having that conversation, because I never really had that in Graze until we had that meeting. I was like, okay, fine. I thought you wanted to be looped in. I know you just want to make a decision. It's just much better to have that conversation, because even if you're very experienced, people will have different sensitivities. There'll be different things that were sensitive. Diageo was a publicly listed company, so certain things were like very, very sensitive about what could be released. Graze was much more open about it. It was much more kind of, can I discuss our revenue with a marketing partner that we're trying to discuss? I mean, Diageo absolutely not. Graze was like, yeah, of course you can. So like, it's those sorts of things where you just need a bit of calibration, and to try and do it by trial and error, it's just a very difficult and slow process. So you're much better being like, can I make a decision? Do you want to be looped in? Like, just having those discussions up front.
And then night and day transformation post having those sorts of conversations at Graze, did you feel like after that you kind of nailed it and were on that trajectory?
Yes. You sort of need a few wins. It takes a while to get a win through, but like one of my bosses left and I was quite keen to test brand bidding on PPC, and he's like, no, that's a stupid idea. And then he left on the Friday. I put it live on like Saturday morning, and then came into Monday with like this lovely spike on the because we used to have TVs all around the office with the metrics. I was like, yes, told you so. So starting to get a bit more experience, starting to get a few more wins, starting to like trust my own judgment, and starting to kind of move forwards a little bit on it.
Cool. And then bring us through to mistake number 3.
So just going to wrap up with Graze. I was there for about 18 months. I was getting bored. I wanted a different role. I wanted to be a bit more hands-on. I kind of wasn't in some of the kind of key meetings and therefore felt a little bit powerless. So I wanted to be in a smaller business in a more senior role. So I negotiated everything. I'd signed my contract. Well, I was about to sign my contract, but they hadn't put the equity in the contract. And I was like, well, I was on the phone to my wife. I was like, do I sign the contract or wait for the equity to come through? And then there was a bit of like kerfuffle in the office. And I thought, okay, maybe we're like getting rid of some engineers. And then I came in to my sort of one-to-one, and then the CEO's there and he's like, we need to have a talk. I was like, okay. And I'd sort of quickly realized what's happening, and quickly realized that if I'd resigned the day before, I wouldn't have got a payout. But because I was formally being made redundant, I was like, brilliant. So it worked out really well. And then I joined Clare Mechanic, and it was a radically different business, and I kind of hadn't realized that. And I did 7 rounds of interview. I had met the investors. I met the founder for a beer multiple times. I still walked into a job which was materially different to what I thought it was. A lot of things were aspirational rather than being done and in reality. So like, oh, we're going to launch into Europe. No, we aspire to launch into Europe. Or like, oh, we're building this tech. No, we aspire to do it. Like, it wasn't there. And in terms of the day-to-day skill, it was radically different. It was, Graze was a story of performance marketing at massive scale. Clare Mechanic was a story of very methodical product changes to improve conversion. So it was a few weeks of like, oh, let's try inserts, let's try meta. It's like, okay, this doesn't work. Like, people are not going to be inspired to repair their car when it's not broken. People are not going to remember your ad for like 18 months, and then when their car breaks, they're going to remember who you are. Like, it's all about kind of bottom of the funnel. So it's a very radically different job. And I think I suppose one of the lessons of Clare Mechanic was sort of over correcting. So I felt like Graze had a bit of a boys club, to be honest. Like, it was a bit of a sort of white male boys club. And ironically, that's what I am. But I wasn't in it for some of them. So there was, with this sort of massive chart around we had the Monday commercial meeting, this massive chart which would show the subscribers, and it was like starting to dip. And I'd be like, well, could we talk about that rather than talking about like the email blast that we did this week? So it was very much kind of in the weeds rather than talking about the bigger picture. And I wanted to be in that kind of strategic conversations, and that's hence why I left. But I sort of over probably corrected at Cluno Mechanic.
As in, it was too small of a business?
I think it was the right size, but like, it's difficult. Like, when you leave a situation that wasn't right, you often seek the exact opposite of what you've had. And maybe the opposite is too extreme.
Gotcha.
So it's sort of...
and the factors that were opposite, what were they?
It was sort of more like how I was approaching it. I was a bit of a bull in a china shop.
Okay.
And should have been a bit more kind of delicate, a bit more diplomatic. I felt that Graze sort of put stuff under the rug. We didn't talk about the elephant in the room, like whatever analogy you want to use. Like, we never discussed the big things, but getting the balance right. I think I was a bit of a bull in a china shop at Clare Mechanic.
Interesting. Interesting. How long did you feel that you were maybe, a bull in a china shop and you'd gone too much in one direction? How quickly did that kind of sense set in from the new role?
I suppose fairly early, like first couple of months.
Mm-hmm.
It was sort of coming from a good place. It was sort of enthusiasm and excitement, but should have been a little bit toned down. But it's better to be the other way around, right?
Gotcha.
I had a guy in my team who was even more enthusiastic, and I was like, well, yeah, I can tell him off for not doing that, but if you get rid of that spark, we'll never get the spark back.
Yeah.
And getting that balance. Like if people care, but they don't. I suppose the story of both of Graze and Clare Mechanic was sort of deeply passionate, deeply driven, but not necessarily knowing exactly where to funnel it at the right time in the right way. I suppose I got a bit better about that over time.
And then where does your story go from that role to Growth & Company?
So I left Clare Mechanic. Third one I got fired in. I don't honestly know why I was fired.
I was just about to say, there's a big thing we want to touch on that. How come you got fired from that, or let go, or
the honest answer is I don't know.
Interesting.
I was kind of brought in. They're like, right, you got to go. I was like, okay. In Venice, I was gonna do. So this was September, I think, and I'd made the decision I was going to leave in January. So I was going to go independent. I was going to advise companies. And it was definitely a blessing in disguise. Like it wasn't the exact timing I was looking for, but I probably would have got to January and then I would have been like, okay, let's do a bit longer. And then you get a notice period and blah, blah, blah. It was actually, with hindsight, it was a good time. Like I'd made the decision I wanted to leave. There was quite a lot of office politics. I couldn't get a lot of the stuff done that I wanted to get done. And I wanted to be independent at this point. So sort of, it wasn't the timing I would have chosen, but it wasn't miles off either. So it was like, okay, well, I was going to do it in January. It's now September. It's fine. So, I mean, I have a background in consulting, saw that, the experience I got was quite useful. I'd now had kind of two companies that are quite different. So I was like, surely there's demand for consulting. And basically there was. But I kind of started freelancing, but with a sort of recipe in my head of, this is what an agency looks like. This is what it needs to do. So it was around, agencies have to be the kind of founders selling the dream and then cheaper people delivering it, basically. Like they have to work in that model. So I tried lots of things and things like kind of no win, no fee conversion rate optimization, which was good at kind of getting you in the door, but people were interestingly kind of worried about the bill that would happen at the end. So, well, if we get a massive win, then yeah, you get a massive bill, but you get a massive win. And it was sort of a weird way of looking at it. So I tested lots of different things, and then I sort of slowly got dragged into hiring. So sort of a few things. So one is when I was at Graze, we had 6 CMOs during my period there, and a lot of them were obviously wrong. They're trying to solve a problem that we don't have. So Graze was amazingly good at performance marketing. Bringing someone in who's amazingly good at performance marketing does not move you forwards. We had a serious problem with retention. We needed a product person and we hired a marketing person to deal with a product issue, which never worked. Some of them, sort of, they were looking at the kind of brand name on the CV and be like, oh, that company's amazing. Like, let's get this person. You're like, they are 50 times the size of what we are. It's a different industry. It's a different model. He's got a team of, 100 people. Like it's radically different in terms of the day-to-day of what we're facing. So I kind of saw that issue. And when I was consulting, I would consult with companies and give them a plan, but they didn't have a team to deliver it. And you sort of check back and they would like implement some of what you said, but like they just didn't have a team to do it. And then I sat in on a final interview for a client, and what the guy said was brilliant, but what he should have said was the issue. and I saw kind of companies making those mistakes. And I remember also talking to a US recruiter, and I was like, well, like, what's your secret sauce? And he's like, oh, we just hammer LinkedIn. I was like, okay. So you hire like sales roles and growth roles and customer service and engineering. He's like, yeah, we hire them all. I was like, this is madness. Like, there's no way you can do this. Like, these are super nuanced roles. And when I was leaving Graze, I'd be interviewing at companies and I would be using the interview to correct what they should have done. I'd be like, you absolutely should not hire me. What you need is this. Like, this is how your team should be structured. Do not hire me. I'm the wrong person. This is what you should do. And it was those sort of things that got me towards setting up my own company and doing Growth and Company as it stands today.
Interesting. And how did you go about, you spoke a lot about like how you position yourself. How did you go about finding the people that you wanted to deliver the services to? You mentioned LinkedIn. Were you, as a company, were you like doing like upper funnel marketing on LinkedIn, organic? Were you, squeezing your network for people? Were you looking at referrals? How did you kind of first get that initial momentum?
So the first project I did was right. I mean, it was February 2020. So like we were doing this sort of funny thing around, kind of touching elbows with people because we thought that was going to solve the pandemic. And I was working for a business. I was their interim head of growth, and they're like, right, we need a permanent one. I was like, why don't I just do it? And that was the very first one. And we had candidates in the interview process, which is basically like WhatsApping my mates. Like, that's what it came down to. No idea what I was doing, but I was WhatsApping my mates. And then the pandemic happened and then basically delayed it for a year. And the sort of moment that I decided to do it, I'd signed more deals in a week than I'd done in like 6 months before, because it was just so much easier to do it. And it was sort of, we're in the kind of first bit of the COVID boom where all these businesses are like going towards e-commerce and digital, and like there was just massive hiring. So it's sort of the perfect time to do it, really.
Wow. And if you could go back to that moment, you sign these number of these deals, you're having this upward growth. What are some of the mistakes you've made since that you just wish you'd known about earlier that you could have
there's loads of them. I mean, I discovered this thing called rec to rec, which is recruitment businesses that hire recruiters for other recruitment businesses to be recruiters. It's this like absolutely wild concept. But then when you realize how difficult it is to hire talent for your own team, you suddenly realize why it makes sense. It's like recruitment businesses that all they do is recruit are using another recruitment business to help them. It doesn't make any sense. But when you start to see the difference between, it's a people business, right? Your people are your product, and the difference is massive. So I kind of came in thinking, we're going to radically have a different model. We don't want any recruiters. We want no like ex-estate agents. We're going to get people who've done the job before. We're going to get, all this sort of stuff. And like, the reality is like, I didn't know how to do the job, and therefore I cannot hire or train people to do a job which I'm still trying to figure out myself. So a lot of mistakes around that, a lot of mistakes around like building kind of IT systems and like getting the processes in place. But in some respects, it sort of worked quite well, because I remember I won a client, and I said, look, I've got to be honest, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I have done the job that you're trying to hire for. Like in terms of recruitment, like I have no idea what I'm doing. Like I remember literally saying that phrase, but I have done the job at a more senior level than what you're hiring for. And they're like, yeah, let's do it. I was like, what do you mean, yeah, let's do it? Like, this is crazy. Like people are trusting me to do this. But it worked quite well. And like being honest, like there's a lot of, recruitment is a massive industry. There's a lot of issues with it. But being honest with clients in terms of what you can and can't do works really well. And yeah, but a lot of mistakes along the way.
How have you taken some of your own, growth experience and applied it to Growth and Company in terms of the way that you think about solving problems or removing bottlenecks or applying your own skill set to that?
Yeah, I mean, I ran the growth team of two-sided marketplace, and I was like, I used to get sent random CVs by recruiters, and I just always thought it was the weirdest thing. It's like, but you don't know me, you don't know the company. and you send me these random CVs on the off chance I happen to be hiring this role.
Mhm.
I always thought it was bizarre. I remember talking to a recruiter. It's like, does it work? It's like, not very often, but it does work.
Mm.
So 95% of the time it annoys people, but 5% it works. He's like, yeah, pretty much. So I looked at this two-sided marketplace. I was like, I don't want to be sending random CVs to people. I don't want to be cold calling clients. I was like, I'm just not going to bother. And I was like, well, how do I get clients to come to me without chasing them at all? It's like, well, when you run a community, we'll control the supply, and then everyone has to come to us for supply. And it's worked really, really well. We do no sales, we do no outreach. It's 100% inbound, which is unheard of in recruitment or any service business, and it's worked really well. So that was sort of looking at it from a critical standpoint. And I think I still try and be an outsider, so kind of thinking, we spend an awful lot of time booking meetings in with people, and like, how do we use Calendly and how do we use technology to do that? Like, it's a very manual thing, so I still look at it from that kind of outside perspective in terms of, what is that growth loop? What can we do more efficiently?
Mm. And in terms of hire some of the people that you've hired that come from the recruitment space or have a recruitment background, what are maybe some of the tricks of the trade that they've kind of passed to you and have taught you, particularly in the way that maybe you handle some of these conversations?
So I've actually just hired the guy, Sean from Graze, who hired me at Graze originally. So I got on really well with him. We spent our time at Graze together. We'd kind of laugh at all the kind of CMOs that they were like failing to hire. And we sort of stayed in contact, and then these joined the business. I think it's just like tricks of the trade in terms of like running the process. Like, it's a very difficult, in a normal project, you have a sort of start, middle, and an end. Whereas in recruitment, you have a definitive start and a definitive end, but everything else in the middle can be anything. So you can think you're at the end, and then the candidates pull out, or the company changes their mind, whatever it is. So just sort of ways of like getting kind of buy-in along the way and making sure everyone's happy, because you want kind of no surprises. So a lot of tips around how do you do that, which are kind of useful in general life as well.
Cool. And now thinking about the future of growth in company and industry headwinds, how do you think, this might be a cliche question, but how do you think AI might be disrupting the business, particularly like your business and recruitment?
There's sort of a weird irony here, is that I've actually advised, I think, 5 different recruitment businesses on their marketing, which is sort of a weird one because they are competing, and also kind of interesting around businesses that are willing to hire marketing people for clients, but they don't trust their own process when they're talking about marketing people for themselves, which is a weird dynamic. The world is becoming more and more senior. So if you think about the kind of marketing pyramid, or the tech pyramid, or the product pyramid, or whatever pyramid it might be, we used to have kind of loads of entry people, and then we'd have, sort of early managers, middle managers, directors, C-level, etc. Now that kind of bottom tier is being removed. The kind of second tier is also being decimated, because if you've got no junior people, you need no managers to manage the people you don't have. And things are becoming more and more and more senior. So I think AI is having a big impact on recruitment when it's at volume, but in terms of businesses are becoming much more lean. So AI is allowing them to do more with less, but the key people in those roles are extremely rare. And I think having personal relationships with them will always be important, regardless of what AI does. The kind of admin of booking meetings, let's hope the AI kind of catches up with it. But like, when people want to move things all around, like, it's such a pain, even with like Calendly and Google Calendar, all that sort of stuff. But like, in terms of sort of exec recruitment, in terms of high-end stuff, I think it's going to be fairly unaffected. In terms of kind of mass market, I've got 200 employees I need to get into my Tesco store. Huge impact in terms of running interviews, running the process, all those sorts of things.
Cool. Okay. And now to wrap things up, what is the advice that you would give yourself 10 years ago? And this can be work related, this can be personal life related, or a kind of synthesis of the two. But the kind of advice that you wish you had.
Well, there's lots, but I think to pick on one, I think comparison is the thief of joy, I think is the expression. So where you compare yourself against other people, it never benefits you. So I think, in your personal life, you've got sort of Instagram and various different things and all these people doing amazing stuff. A friend of mine had the most amazing Instagram, but her life was going through challenges, let's politely say. And it's almost sort of inversely correlated, right? The people who are kind of killing it at life are not posting stuff on LinkedIn, on Instagram. And then in the work context, a lot of LinkedIn is bullshit. A lot of it's not true. And, particularly in the world of startups and the world of growth in startups in particular, the grass can always look greener on the other side. Like, this company did really well. And I turned down this job and that company's been really successful. And there's a whole lot of things that kind of woulda, coulda, shoulda. But it's a very easy thing to say and difficult thing to do, but trying not to compare yourself, trying to be conscious of the reality of other companies is different. I think when you talk to founders and you see their kind of beautiful LinkedIn posts and you chat to them and yeah, that's bullshit. We get, a lot of difficulties, a lot of issues, and you're okay, a lot of it's like that.
Yeah. And the flip question, what do you think yourself in 10 years' time would give your current self in terms of advice?
Oh, that's interesting. I'm trying to get better at the kind of making the vision of the future the reality of today, and trying to, I feel like I've got a lot of plans and getting them implemented is really difficult. Partly because of ADHD, partly because running a small business, but I've got 2 small kids, lots of reasons, but trying to sort of back myself a bit more and getting things done, and not having sort of being better at implementing things here and now rather than being a bit busy this week, I'll try and do that next week, or I'll try and do that next week. And the reality is that never comes and things get delayed and delayed. So just trying to implement future plans. I think the phrase is, what is it like if you want to sit under a tree in the future, you got to plant the seed now, or something like that.
Or the best time to plant a tree was yesterday. The second best time is today.
Yeah, there's a few around that of are you planting seeds for the future? Are you kind of laying foundations for things? AI is a good example. It is changing things. Am I doing enough to move things forwards? But yeah, trying to get more of a reality today.
Cool. And then absolute final question, and you might have almost slightly answered it 2 questions back, but I'll ask it all the same. What is your current favorite quotation and why?
It is comparison is the thief of joy.
Mm-hmm.
I had a look at, I think there's 2 of them that are quite similar. I think one is the thief of excitement or something, and one is Twain and one is Roosevelt. And I think, when I was at business school, there were, I think, at least 3 billionaires in my year. They were not the 3 happiest people in business school. Mm-hmm. They have challenges that they're facing. They might have a yacht, but their mate's got a bigger yacht. And whatever your definition of success is, the reality is you've got to be kind of happy in yourself, because whenever you hit it, there'll always be someone who's a bit further along the line or whatever it might be. And I think particularly in the world of startups, where it's our business is doing well, growing hundreds of % a year, but these guys are growing thousands of % a year, and they've raised more money and they've done this and blah, blah, blah. So wherever you are in life, there'll always be someone who's further ahead, and just being conscious of that. And the tip I have for myself is making sure you're kind of looking backwards rather than necessarily looking forwards to what other people are doing. You're okay, this is where we started, this is where we are, and being grateful for that journey and that kind of progression.
Excellent. Okay. Super strong note to end on.
No worries.
Love the gratitude. Joseph, thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, no worries.